My name is Tiffany Q, and welcome to my ABRSM Grade 5 Theory Lessons series, where I record snippets of my live lessons with my students. Please note that this is not a substitute for a textbook. If you're preparing for the theory exam, I would still recommend having a teacher to guide you through both the coursework and exam paper preparation. Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to learn about groupings and rests. So groupings are basically how all of the beats are organized in every time signature, and there's specific rules on how to present rhythms in music. And the objective of all this, or the main point, the reason why we do all this is to ensure that the music is very easy to read. So it's kind of like musical grammar. If you think of English grammar, it's really important to have good spelling and good punctuation, good syntax, so that when other people read, it's very easy to understand what you're trying to express. So same thing with music. And before we go into the specific rules for the groupings and rests, I want to just remind you again of all the time signatures. So all the regular time signatures are divided into simple or compound, so one or the other. Simple time signatures have basic note values such as crotchets, minims, and quavers, and compound time signatures have dotted groupings, so dotted crotchets, dotted minims, and dotted quavers. Every regular time signature can be divided in either 2 beats in a bar, 3 beats in a bar, or 4 beats in a bar. Okay, so duple, triple, or quadruple. So never 5, 6, 7, except for the irregular time signatures. When we have 6/8, for example, I just want to demonstrate the difference between 6/8 and 3/4, because they can oftentimes be confused. The reason why they can be confused is if we write it out here. If I'm going to draw these out in the quavers, we can count 6 quavers in total. And if I write the 6/8 time out, we can also count 6. So what really is the point of having 1 in 3/4 and 1 in 6/8? Well, actually there is a huge difference. The fact is, 3/4 is simple triple, which means that there are 3 main beats in a bar, and that's how we should feel the music. Whereas 6/8 is compound duple, meaning that there are only 2 main beats in a bar. So this actually gives a very strong difference between the music written in 3/4 and 6/8. So if I play something in 3/4, you can feel that there are 3 main beats. Okay, so we're really sort of not quite emphasizing, but we're feeling it in 3. So every beat has a sort of slight emphasis. And then for the 6/8, if I play the same notes, so we feel that the emphasis is on this 4th quaver rather than every single one. So one is da 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 da, and the other one is da 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 da. So there's a slight difference in the nuances, and that's why we have that as a difference. So how do we tell the differences in music? Well, it's all about how they are structured and organized, and this is what groupings is all about. Notice how I can clearly see that there's a crotchet beat there, because the 2 quavers are joined together. And then I can clearly identify the 2nd and the 3rd crotchet beats. In the 6/8 time, on the other hand, I can clearly identify that that is 1 dotted crotchet beat, and that is the 2nd dotted crotchet beat. So just to introduce you to the idea of groupings, this would be a very poorly written 3/4 time. So if I had these 2 quavers and I had... Okay, so that would be poor grouping, because I can see the first group here, and then we have this random quaver on its own. Why is this on its own when I see another quaver here, and those 2 could clearly make up one group to form the 2nd crotchet? Same principle with these 2. So this here would be the example of sort of bad grouping or bad grammar. grouping refers to how the notes are organized and beamed in a time signature to show the main beats very clearly. This makes music much easier for performers to read and is more grammatically correct. Every time signature has a different style as to how to group them, but here are some basic rules. We should be able to see all the main beats in a bar, and if possible, they are grouped together. So for example, if I have a 4/4 time, it would be good for me to be able to see all the main beats. So that's the first crotchet, second crotchet, third, and fourth. So why? Well, because we're in 4/4 time, which is a simple quadruple time signature. Simple meaning basic note values, quadruple meaning 4 of them in a bar, so 4 crotchets in a bar. So it's good if we're able to see all the main beats clearly. Generally, that is. If I give you another example in 9/8 time, so you can see that that's one beat on its own because we're in 9/8, so it is compound triple, meaning that there are dotted beats, and there are 3 of them. So 3 dotted crotchets in a bar. And the way they're sort of joined and beamed together, so the beam is this horizontal line going across. So they're beamed together specifically in the beats that they're in. So that when we're actually playing this on your instrument, we can, in our heads, sort of group them together and we can understand clearly where the main beats are in a piece. Let me give you a wrong example of this. So a wrong example might be okay, so those are the exact same sort of rhythms or note values, just written in a different way. And you can see it's very disorganized. You know, up on like first glance, we have no idea what on earth that is. Yeah? You know, why are these sort of tied and separated? What is this random crotchet doing? There's a crotchet, this is like a dotted quaver, and then we've got a random semiquaver on its own. Yeah, so that would be sort of poor grouping, and that would be an incorrect version. Whereas the top one here, we can very clearly see it's in 9/8 time. We see the 3 beats very clearly in that bar. Okay, so there are some general rules I'm going to go through now. If we are in 2/4, 3/4, or 4/4 time, it's possible to join all of the beats together. So 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4 time. 2/4 time. If I have a bunch of quavers or semiquavers or demi-semiquavers, it's okay to join them all together like this instead of separating them. If I'm in 3/4 time, it's also possible. Something like this. Or I could join them all together. So these are some exceptions to when it is okay to do that. Now 4/4 time, we can only do that as long as we're able to split the bar in half. So what I mean by that is, well, 4/4 time, half of it is a minim. So if I'm going to join them together, I must split it at the minim. Like this. Okay, so that is half, and this is exactly half. So a wrong one would be to do this. Beaming it or joining the notes in the middle of the bar, like this. Okay, that's very heavy there in the middle, so we try to avoid that where possible. In 3/8 time, 3/8, 4/8, or 2/8. So In these time signatures, these are still simple time signatures now, it's also generally accepted that we join all of the notes together. Okay, like this. Three time as well. 4/8 is quite a funny one. I've seen this grouped in many different ways. Sometimes they group it as like sort of 2 quavers plus 2 quavers. Sometimes I see them all joined together. Okay, so either way. Okay, so here's some wrong examples. If you find a 3/8 bar where it's all separated like this, then that is incorrect. Okay, or if you see it all separated like this, or this. Okay, so where possible, we should be joining all the notes together in these time signatures. In simple time, we try to use dotted notes where possible, and I think that's quite self-explanatory. Okay, for example, if I have 4/4 time, where I want a dotted crotchet and a quaver, I will generally write the dotted notes. So that seems very, very straightforward, but I want to get back to that when we look at the compound time signatures, and you'll realize that the compound time signatures are slightly different in terms of, when to use dotted notes. You might remember me saying this when we were looking at the different note values and rests, that if we have a bar with absolutely nothing in it, we always use a semi-brief rest. Okay? Even if it's like 3/8, doesn't matter, if there's nothing in that bar, use a semi-brief rest. Even if it's 2/4, where technically we could use a minim, it's actually incorrect. If it's an empty bar, we use a semi-brief rest, always. In terms of rests follow the same rules, mostly, as the notes. So, generally, we like to see all the beats when we're looking at the rests. For example, like this. Or, if we have a 3/4 time, because we have 3 beats in a bar, it's good to show where the 3 beats are. So here would be an incorrect example, joining them into a minim, because then we can't see where the main beats are. The only exception is when we have 4/4 time, and it's the same rule as the grouping earlier. Do you remember when I was saying that if you have all quavers, you can beam them as long as it's like half of a bar and the other half of a bar, like this. Now that same rule actually goes for rest as well. So if we have half of the bar that's empty, we may use a minim rest. Okay? But if it's in the middle of a bar, we must write out them like this. Okay? So we cannot have crotchet and then minim rest here, another crotchet, because that's 2 beats in the middle of the bar, and that would be incorrect. The same goes for slightly trickier time signatures. If we take a look at 6/16, for example, which has 2 dotted quavers in a bar, if we start off with a dotted quaver and then the rest of it is empty, we must put a dotted quaver rest, because this is 1 beat and this is 2 beats. Just like in 2/4, how if you have a crotchet and you have a rest, you will put a crotchet rest here. Okay? Somehow, when it gets a little bit trickier, some students think that, this is okay as well. It's not okay. Just like you wouldn't divide this randomly into 2 quaver rests. Okay, so no matter what time signature we're in, the rules all apply. And finally, for the simple time at least, if we have a rest in the middle of a beat, for example, 2/4 again. If we have, let's say, a crotchet here, and then we have like a semi-quaver to end off the bar, but we're missing something here, and we need to put a rest in. If that ever happens, what you need to do is you need to divide that entire beat into 2 and group it like that. And you just need to keep dividing into 2 and into 2 into 2 where possible. So in this case, one beat is a crotchet. So when we divide a crotchet into 2, we get 2 quavers. So that is how we're going to have to group this one. So we're going to start off with a quaver, and then we're going to have a semi-quaver rest. So the grouping is 1 quaver plus 1 quaver. A wrong version of this would be to use a dotted quaver rest, or to switch it around, to have a semi-quaver rest first and then a quaver rest. Okay? Because then that wouldn't be the proper grouping. So when you have a beat which is a little bit empty, for example, this crotchet is not full, it's not a full crotchet, then what we do is we split it into half. So instead of grouping in crotchets, we divide and group into quavers, and then we assign the rests accordingly like that. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the compound time signatures. For the compound time signatures, again, we really want to see where the main beats are. Now, do you remember where I was saying that for the simple time signatures, we like to use, dotted beats, dotted notes, or, we would write 1 note instead of 2, if we can do that. But for the compound time, we use a lot of ties, mainly to show where the main beats are. So for example, if I have a crotchet, quaver, I'm going to use a tie here to join these together. Like this. So I'm doing that so that I can see that this is 1 dotted crotchet beat, this is our 2nd beat, and that's our 3rd beat. So a wrong version of this would be to start off with the crotchet and then, to write that as a crotchet, because quaver plus quaver technically equals crotchet, and then having it like this. If I write it out like that, then I have no idea where the 2nd beat is. It's sort of somewhere in here. Okay, so that's why I would split it into ties sometimes, just to be able to see where the main beats are, and that's a rule specifically for compound time. Much like 4/4, which has 4 crotchet beats in a bar, when we have 12/8, 4 dotted crotchet beats in a bar, we still apply the same rules. So if I have 2 beats, like this, and then I have my other 2 beats that are empty, I can just use 1 rest. So I'm going to put a dotted minim rest there, okay, because it's exactly half of the bar. But if it's in the middle of the bar, for example, if I have a dotted crotchet here and a dotted crotchet here, and I have in the middle of the bar, I must show the other beats, okay? I cannot use a dotted minim rest in that instance, because it's kind of in the middle. So if it's the first half or the second half, then I can divide it into half like that. And then the final thing that I'm going to talk about for the groupings and rests is that when you are in compound time, so when you're dealing with your 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8, we know that they are grouped in dotted crotchets. But if I have a dotted crotchet beat that starts off with a quaver and then that's it, the rule is you need 2 quaver rests after. Okay, you cannot write it as 1 crotchet. But on the other hand, if you start off with sort of 2 empty quavers and then you have a quaver here, that's your 2nd beat, then you must put it as a crotchet rest. And you cannot write that out as 2 quavers. So those are just 2 specific rules that the ABRSM has that you just need to learn off by heart. So if you start off with a dotted crotchet beat, and you start off with a quaver and then emptiness, you need to put 2 quaver rests. But if you have a dotted crotchet beat where it starts off like the opposite, where it starts off with 2 empty quavers, then you need to write 1 crotchet rest like that. So as long as you're following those rules, then you should be okay. When you are looking at a question about the rests or the groupings, so for the groupings, you need to ask yourself, what is it grouped in? So is it grouped in minims? Is it grouped in crotchets, quavers? What is the rule for that? For example, if I'm in 3/2 time, this would be acceptable because I can see my first minim, that's my second minim, and that's my third minim. Okay, so 3 minims in a bar. But if I were in, let's say, 6/4 time, which deals with dotted crotchets, I would have to join that as 1 dotted crotchet, and then I would have, dotted minim, and then have this as a dotted minim rest as well. Okay, so that would be the correct way to write it here, to show that I have the 2 beats. So technically they're very similar, but for the 3/2 time we would write it out like this, and for the 6/4 time we'd write it out like this, because of the different rules in groupings that they have. So for groupings in music, check to see if you can very clearly see the main beats. And then for the rests, what you need to ask yourself is, number 1, does it even add up to the bar? Sometimes the rest is too short or too long. That's immediately wrong. And then number 2, is it grouped correctly? Is it written out clearly?